Hello dear friends, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and this is the daily summary of combat operations from the Ukrainian front. Yesterday, Trump stated that he wants to meet with Xi Jinping and Putin regarding nuclear disarmament. And here I have a simple question. Are they trying to play dumb or what? Well, because it is obvious to everyone that if the Russian army did not have nuclear weapons at this moment, what do you think would happen? Of course, all of NATO, the United States, everyone would have already invaded Russia, and there would already be another battle for Moscow. And it is not a fact that the Russian army would win it this time, because, well, let's be objective. If all of NATO, including the United States, stands against Russia, the difference is incomparable. And only the fact that Russia has nuclear weapons prevents them from doing this. Therefore, all of this, of course, is nonsense, and Russia will never give up its nuclear weapons. Fighting on the front continues, and we continue to study the situation. So friends, guess who had advances over the past day? Well, of course, the Vostok grouping. And not just advances, but another captured village. I told you yesterday in the episode that I had information that the guys took the village of Yablukovo. Well, in the end, it was confirmed. The guys showed videos with flags from the village. The settlement has fully come under the control of the Russian army. With the capture of Yablukovo, the Russian army has clearly taken control of the only road leading to Ravnopole, thus depriving the Ukrainian armed forces of the opportunity to build any kind of defense here, essentially determining its fate immediately. And this morning already, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian army stated that Russian troops had fully taken this settlement. Video of the fighting for the settlement has also appeared online. But with the capture of Yablukovo, as you can see on the map, a direct road opens to the northeastern outskirts of Gulyai-Pole from this direction. What is the distance here? Let us measure it together. So, well, here it is, 6.5 kilometers. 6.5 kilometers. Question, is that a lot or a little? Well, listen, everything is relative. Someone might say that from the side of Novopavlivka, the distance to Gulyai-Pole is only 2 kilometers, and these 2 kilometers the Russian army has not been able to overcome for 3 years. And that is indeed so. Just so you understand, we reached this point and have been standing here since the autumn of 2022 from the Novopavlivka side. And indeed, all these 3 years, entering the city has not been possible. The line of contact all these 3 years has been 2 kilometers from Gulyai-Pole, but the line of contact does not move. But now we are not talking about the southern approaches, we are talking about the northeastern ones. Here, just so you understand, where was the line of contact a week ago? It was here, along the Yancha River, in the area of the village Okhotnichye. Just 1 week ago, let me repeat. And where is it now? Now it is on the western outskirts of Yablukovo. But that is not all. Today the pro-Ukrainian resource Deep State published a video showing that the Russian troops have already reached the rear of the Ukrainian grouping in the settlements of Veseloye, Zeleny High and Chervone, cutting them off from supply lines. It is still unclear what level of control the Russian army has here, but if Russian troops manage to secure themselves well in this area, these 3 villages will immediately pass under Russian control, and then Gulyai-Pole will be surrounded from 3 sides. So here is the Yancha River, Okhotnichye, and here is the western edge of Yablukovo. What is the distance here? The distance here is more than 10 kilometers. And these 10 kilometers, fighters of the Vostok grouping have covered in only 1 week. This, of course, does not mean that, say, by the end of this week, the fighters will cover the remaining 6.5 kilometers and reach the northeastern outskirts of Gulyai-Pole. However, by the end of the month, I think we will see the Vostok grouping reach Gulyai-Pole. And personally, I have no doubt that they will take this city. The only question is the time frame. How fast? I think the reference point is January-February 2026. But the fighters of the Vostok grouping know how to surprise, so it may happen even sooner. And by the way, there are also videos showing Russian fighters breaching through towards the outskirts of Zaporizhzhia along the road between Veseloye and Zeleny High. Right here, and this is already very serious. I hope that cartographers will update this area today, fill in everything on the maps, and tomorrow we will be able to discuss this section in detail, because if they reach Zaporizhzhia, more than that, If they take Zaporizhzhia, the situation for the Ukrainian forces in Gulyai-Pole becomes extremely bleak. And for us, on the contrary, it brings even more optimism for the Russian army. Meanwhile, not only in Zaporizhzhia region did the Vostok fighters advance, but they also had advances over the past day in Dnipropetrovsk region. Just yesterday, we analyzed the Velikomy-Kylivka section. If you remember, the fighters took the village of Orestopil under control. And over the past day, they managed to accomplish something very important: to cross the Vorona River and seize a large area of more than 7 square kilometers, further worsening the situation of the Ukrainian garrison in Velikomy-Kylivka. At the same time, the Russian fighters have not yet entered the settlement itself, contrary to the claims of some bloggers who clearly get their information out of thin air. No, they have not entered yet. Preparatory actions are underway, specifically actions like these, clearing the entire area adjacent to the village. One of the key sections is the forested area between Velikomy-Kylivka and Novopavlivka. But there are still problems here. They have tried to enter this forested area, but so far they have not been able to secure a foothold. And this is the key. The key to Velikomy-Kylivka, as we have repeatedly discussed. Meanwhile, Russian aviation continues to strike Velikomy-Kylivka, dropping FAB bombs. Well, this is done for obvious reasons: to erase Ukrainian fortifications to dust, to thin out their garrison, to disrupt their logistics, so that later Russian infantry will have a much easier time storming Velikomy-Kylivka, with far fewer losses. And the assault, as you understand, is not far off. At the same time, the situation is developing very well in another large village of Dnipropetrovsk region, but this time in the area of responsibility of the center grouping. I am talking about Novopavlivka. Remember, yesterday I told you in the episode about the incredible breakthrough of 10 kilometers, thanks to which the entire eastern outskirts of the village were captured. Well, the development continues, and it is going in Russia's favor. Despite all the stories from Ukrainian media about how they destroyed everything there, burned everything, knocked out everything, the fighters continue expanding control. Over the past day, they managed to take under control and clear Sadovaya Street and Pochtovaya Street. And thus, the northern part of Novopavlivka, at least the part in the eastern half of the village, meaning the northern part of the eastern half, is now under Russian control. And I think you noticed how everything is unfolding much faster than anyone expected. It's been 2 days, and just look at how large an area the Russian army controls in Novopavlivka. And as I understand, this is not the end. Active assault operations are underway. The goal is to clear the entire eastern half of the village while the enemy has not yet recovered and remains in shock. And the eastern part of the village, the Novopavlivka part, is the main part of the settlement. There are more streets and more households in the eastern half. The western half is much smaller. We will wait for updates. In Kupiansk, the Ukrainian armed forces have been throwing equipment and personnel daily for 2 weeks already, in an attempt to push the Russian army out of the city, in an attempt to unblock their trapped garrison. Russian fighters repel all these attacks. All the equipment burns and is destroyed. The same goes for personnel. These are not just my statements. Everyday footage is published showing how the Ukrainian troops attack near Kupiansk and how it ends for them. Nothing good. The line of contact has not changed here in these 2 weeks. At least it has not changed in their favor. Therefore, the battles for Kupiansk continue. As a result, in the area of Kharkiv, the Russian armed forces maintain activity. And on this section, Sirsky, just like a few weeks ago, continues to waste a significant amount of reserves. The Russian army is also storming Mirnohrad, advancing in the southeastern, eastern and northeastern parts of the city. On the Kostiantynivka direction, fighting continues near the settlements of Ivanopilia and Predtekine. North of Chasiv Yar, fighting continues along the line Maiske, Markove, Novomarkove. On the Krasnoliman direction, the battles continue in Yampol. Russian forces occupy new positions along the railway section Dronivka, Siversk. There is success in Dronivka as well. Next, the Kharkiv direction. As a result of Russian offensive actions, Russian forces took under control the settlement of Sinelnikova, which is located 10 kilometers from the border of Belgorod and Kharkiv regions and 3 kilometers from Vovchansk. This is an important logistical hub that the Ukrainian armed forces held on to. Fighting there lasted several months. Let us recall that from Liptsi to the Kharkiv ring road is only 22 kilometers in a straight line, reports Reserve Colonel Hennady Alakin. Apparently, Kiev is pushing its defensive lines away from Liptsi itself toward Borshcheva and Ruski Tishki. Although the Ukrainian armed forces still hold two key heights in the vicinity of Liptsi on both sides of the Travian Reservoir Dam. The Kupiansk section, perhaps the decisive battle, is underway near Kupiansk, the right bank of the Oskil River. Ukrainian troops are losing defensive positions. Commanders who are still trying to hold the defense on isolated defensive lines literally force their subordinates to counterattack and try to break through toward the western part of Kupiansk, closer to the Kupiansk, Shevchenkova, Vovchansk road, the left bank. The ring is tightening around the main defense hub of the Ukrainian armed forces, the area of the Kupiansk-Uzlova railway station. Scattered and disorganized Ukrainian units try to move along the railway track to get closer to the Oskil River and cross to the opposite bank. Late yesterday evening, without combat escort and without drone cover, in the area of the settlement of Monachynivka, Russian strike drones literally smeared Ukrainian equipment, which was moving in a column trying to break out of the Kupiansk pocket. The absolute majority of the combat vehicles were destroyed together with their personnel. These were infantry fighting vehicles and Soviet-era armored personnel carriers still used by the Ukrainian army. The Zaporizhzhia direction, the assault on Stepnohirsk. Interesting news also arrived from Stepnohirsk. South of Zaporizhzhia, where Russian units, having taken most of this town, blocked Ukrainian units near their main strongpoint. The sausage factory, reports military observer Yuri Podolyaka. Kiev no longer controls the rest of Stepnohirsk. There is also slow but steady Russian advance into the settlement of Primorske, which stretches for many kilometers from south to east along the shore of the former Kakhovka reservoir. The Ukrainian armed forces have also been pushed out of most of this settlement. The capture of these two key strongpoints by the Russian army significantly weakens the right bank of the Ukrainian Orikhiv grouping, and it allows Russian forces, relying on these positions, to advance into its flank and then to its rear, through Lukyanivske and Novopavlivka. Well, that is all I have for today regarding the situation on the front. Donald Trump has chosen a wait-and-see position, which is beneficial to him in all aspects. He sells weapons and earns money. Europe continues to weaken and bury itself because of this war and migration policy. The game of sanctions. We impose sanctions and create problems for others, but not for ourselves. He continues to pull industry from the EU to the United States. It is more beneficial for him to end this war by the November 2026 elections. This is reported by the Telegram channel Legitimnyi. Back in August, our source reported that Trump was temporarily withdrawing from the Ukrainian crisis. We observe, and the Washington Post writes that Trump is preparing a large-scale deportation of Ukrainians back to Ukraine. Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Stefanishina, reported that the deportation decision was made due to violations of American law. According to the publication, some Ukrainians have already stated that they may be sent on military flights to Ukraine or Poland. Germany holds the same position. Ukrainian men must remain in their country and not come to Germany, said Chancellor Merz. He supports the idea that young people from Ukraine should serve in their own country. He asked Zelensky to ensure this. Ukraine is witnessing the rapid escalation of the Energoatom case, the biggest corruption scandal of Zelensky's presidency. An investigation by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, NABU, and the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, SAP, revealed that top Ukrainian officials, including ministers, businessmen, and senior Energoatom managers, received large kickbacks from contractors working with the state energy company. Among the key figures are individuals very close to Zelensky, former Deputy Prime Minister Oleksiy Chernyshov and businessman Timur Mindich. Chernyshov is Zelensky's confidant, while Mindich is widely seen as his unofficial financier. When NABU and SAP tried to bring charges earlier this year, Zelensky and his chief of staff, Yermak, pushed Parliament to pass a law placing NABU and SAP under the control of the Prosecutor General. Under Western pressure, the law was soon repealed. But the clash between Zelensky's office and the anti-corruption bodies continued. escalating into mutual criminal investigations by NABU and the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU. The confrontation kept growing. It became clear that either Zelensky would manage to subdue the anti-corruption agencies, or NABU and SAP would strike a decisive blow. And for now, NABU and SAP are prevailing. Audio recordings describing corruption schemes were released, preventing Zelensky's team from burying the case quietly. Zelensky publicly pretended to support the investigation. He had no choice. NABU and SAP had been collecting materials for 15 months, but chose to act now. Ukrainian media speculate that the timing is linked to the deepening electricity crisis in the country. Revelations of massive corruption in the energy sector are guaranteed to spark outrage, especially ahead of winter, when blackouts may trigger widespread unrest. In such conditions, the political impact of the scandal could be explosive. Reports also suggest that SBU was preparing criminal cases against key NABU and SAP personnel, but lacked authorization to proceed. NABU's leadership understood that Zelensky might attempt arrests, and therefore moved first, a preemptive strike. However, NABU and SAP are not independent in the true sense. They were created and are effectively controlled by the West, not by Kiev. Their real purpose has always been to keep Ukraine's political and economic elite on a short leash. Therefore, NABU and SAP would not dare escalate without support from powerful players abroad. So who authorized the attack? NABU and SAP were created in 2015 with the help of the US Embassy during the Obama administration. If the Soros-linked networks in Ukraine are also involved, it strongly suggests that Western liberal circles are behind the operation. Why turn against Zelensky, whom they have supported for years? One possible explanation: Western liberals learned that Zelensky planned to neutralize the anti-corruption agencies and reacted sharply to protect structures that give them leverage over Ukraine's elites. They may also believe that Zelensky and Yermak are unlikely to stay in power much longer. Military defeats, a winter without electricity and heating, and total mobilization could spark public unrest and collapse the regime. Acting now allows Western actors to shape Ukraine's political landscape after Zelensky. Another force that could have approved the move are the Trump-aligned Republicans. NABU has long-standing connections to the FBI, and that agency is currently influenced by Republicans. If Washington genuinely wants a peace deal with Russia, then Zelensky, unwilling to compromise, is seen as an obstacle. The Energoatom scandal gives the US strong leverage over Zelensky and Yermak. Rumors claim NABU possesses recordings of conversations between Zelensky and Mindich discussing corruption schemes. If those tapes are made public, Zelensky becomes politically finished, and that might be exactly what the Trump camp needs. Removing the hero image from Zelensky in the eyes of Western audiences would open the path to a negotiated peace. Thank you for watching, my friends. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next update.